Comey to task over newly released memos the former FBI director kept to document his conversations with the president. The Justice Department's Inspector General is now investigating if Comey mishandled classified information by giving some of those documents to a friend who then shared them with a reporter. The president calling that move illegal and saying it raises questions about the Mueller Russia investigation. Meanwhile, 3 GOP committee chairmen out with a scathing statement on the Comey memos, accusing him of political bias in his interactions with the Obama-era officials versus President Trump. I'm joined right now by one of those lawmakers. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes is live this morning at the World Ag Expo in California, and Congressman Nunes is also a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
I want to get to that memo, the letter that you have written after the Jim Comey memos were out. But first, let me start here. Let's pick up where we left off the last time we spoke, Mr. Chairman. You joined us 4 weeks ago on this program. At that time, you said you wanted to get the electronic communication from the Department of Justice and the FBI. You wanted that electronic communications to understand exactly how the Trump investigation into collusion even began. You've now since seen the electronic communication, yes?
That's correct. So it took us a long time to actually get this, what's called the electronic communication. As we know it now for your viewers, what that is it's the original intelligence, the original reasons that the counterintelligence investigation was started. Now, this is really important to us because a counterintelligence investigation uses the tools of our intelligence services that are not supposed to be used on American citizens. So we've long wanted to know, well, what intelligence did you have that actually led to this investigation? So what we found now, after the investigators have reviewed it, is that, in fact, there was no intelligence. So we have a traditional partnership with what's called the Five Eyes Agreement. Five Eyes Agreement involves our friends in Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Canada, and of course us. So long time process and procedures in place where we move intelligence across. We are not supposed to spy on each other's citizens, and it's worked well, and it continues to work well. And we know it's working well because there was no intelligence that passed from Five Eyes through the Five Eyes channels to our government. And that's why we had to see that original communication. So now we're trying to figure out, as you know, we are investigating the State Department. We think there's some major irregularities at the State Department, and we're trying to figure out how it is that this information about Mr. Papadopoulos, of all people, who was supposedly meeting with some folks in London, how that made it over across into the FBI's hands. We know a little bit about that because of what some of the State Department officials themselves have said about that. So we were glad to get this behind us, but now, of course, as we peel another piece back, it leaves more unanswered questions, which we're trying to get to the bottom of.
Mr. Chairman, you've got to explain what you just said. I think this is extraordinary, that you're telling us that in order for the FBI, the Department of Justice, to launch an investigation into so-called collusion between President Trump and the Russians, there was no official intelligence used. Then how did this investigation start? I don't understand, sir. Please explain.
Well, I think that is the point. We don't understand. We've never understood because we have access to these finished intelligence products, and we've never seen one. So we thought, well, maybe there was one that went through a different channel that was kept really quiet, that was secret, that was kept from the Congress and other folks. Well, in fact, after our investigators reviewed this, that is not what happened. There was no Five Eyes intelligence product as it's been reported. There was no product, and I think that's a major problem because we have to have trust with our partners, with our allies. We have to make sure that our agencies talk and they work out problems. We have to make sure that they don't spy on either American citizens or that we're not spying on British citizens. These are all things that have been around for decades. So, and this is even more critical. Let's just at the highest level, what is this? What is this about? This was about a counterintelligence investigation that was at the height of a political campaign where you opened up an investigation using these intelligence services to spy on the other campaign. It's really serious stuff.
It's quite extraordinary. So you're investigating the State Department. Does that mean it was Hillary Clinton pulling the strings? I mean, here you have Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State. She's the other candidate. Is she pulling the strings on an investigation launched on her opponent, her political opponent, Donald Trump?
Well, we don't know that yet, but what I can tell you what we do know. We do know that longtime associates of Hillary Clinton, including Sidney Blumenthal and another person named, I think, Corey Scheer, were actively giving information to the State Department that was somehow making its way to the FBI. This is from two people within the State Department who have now publicly come out and said this in major news publications. So we know this. We know this was at least two witnesses who have publicly said this. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to piece all that together. We now know that there was no official intelligence that was used to start this investigation. We know that Sidney Blumenthal and others were pushing information into the State Department. So we're trying to piece all of that together, and that's why we continued to look at the State Department.
We are awaiting the IG report as it relates to Jim Comey, as it relates to the handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. We got these Comey memos this week. Tell me what you got from these memos. What struck you most?
Well, the main reason we wanted them out is because the mainstream media and the Democrats have been running around talking about collusion. When they figured out there was no collusion, they moved on to obstruction of justice. What Mr. Gowdy, who was able to review these a long time ago, and Mr. Goodlatte had said, and now we know this from reading them, is that once you read all of the Comey memos, it becomes Exhibit A in a defense against that there was no obstruction of justice. So I think when you read all of them, good legal minds review these. When you have the President of the United States saying, look, investigate all of my people. If anybody in my campaign was colluding with the Russians, I want to know, and they need to be brought to justice. Something of that nature is in the Comey memos. So this is why the Comey memos needed to get out, because, if there is obstruction of justice, we want to know about it. But clearly there wasn't, and that's what the Comey memos prove. Now, I think for Mr. Comey, when you match up his memos with what's in his book, with the interviews that he's giving, I think he's got a lot of problems coming in the future as it relates to what the IG is looking at into his behavior during the Clinton email investigation.
Well, what kind of problems? I mean, we know that the IG has recommended criminal charges against his former deputy, Andrew McCabe. Where does that go? What does that mean, criminal charges? Where do you see that going? And is that the same fate that we will see for Jim Comey?
Well, it's hard to say right now, but we know that. So Mr. McCabe has been recommended that he face criminal charges. Now his lawyer, and he has a right to his lawyer. His lawyer has said no, this is not true. What the IG, Mr. Comey, is lying. Essentially, is what Mr. McCabe is saying, that Comey did give him the right to go talk to the press. So this all has to be fleshed out. Clearly, the IG. The IG believed Mr. Comey, that Comey did not give Mr. McCabe the ability to go talk to the press. Now, as it relates to Mr. Comey, you've got the added problem now that the memos that he wrote, the 7 memos that he decided to write on President Trump, never wrote memos on any of the other meetings he had with the other president or the AG or anyone else prior to this, but he kept 7 memos. 4 of those were classified. He decided to launder them to a friend who then leaked them to the New York Times. If those memos contain classified information, he purposely did that. He purposely leaked them in order to get a special counsel started after he was fired. He leaked pieces of these, so we need to figure out exactly what is it that he leaked. Who did he give these memos to? And was it just the friend that leaked them to the New York Times, or were there others? I believe there were others. I think that these Comey memos were actually given to several people. It contained classified information. The irony is the very thing that Mr. Comey cleared Mrs. Clinton of.
Real quick, we're going to take a break right here, but with all of what you're saying, whether it's no official intelligence, the president pushing to find out the truth, no obstruction of justice, are these reasons to shut down this Robert Mueller special counsel probe?
Well, look, I in the beginning, I actually supported special counsel because I thought, okay, Mr. Mueller will come in, longtime FBI guy. He will quickly see that there's no evidence of collusion, which there was, because we had not seen any. Just like I said, we've not seen any intelligence product that shows that there was any collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians.
Right.
But that he would quickly go after the felony that occurred when General Flynn was talking to the Russian ambassador, and all of that information was leaked out, which is a major felony at the highest level. So I thought, great, we'll have a special counsel. They'll close those leaks. We'll figure out who that was. Well, that never happened. It appears like this was clearly what started as a counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign. They drilled a bunch of dry holes, never found any collusion. They moved to obstruction. They've got a special counsel, and now God knows where this is going to go. Right. But I think the American people are getting sick and tired of it.
Well, they did manage to raid Michael Cohen's office and home and hotel room, let's not forget. Chairman Nunes, stay with us. We've got more to talk about. And I want to get your reaction to this next story. The same people who helped fund that salacious and unverified Trump dossier now have some new targets in their sights, filing a lawsuit on Friday against the Trump campaign, Russia, and WikiLeaks, alleging conspiracy to undercut Democrats in the 2016 presidential election by stealing tens of thousands of emails and documents. We're back with Congressman Devin Nunes, chairman of the House Intel Committee. And Mr. Chairman, your thoughts, your reaction to this lawsuit?
Well, my first thought is that it's this some kind of joke. This must be a joke. I mean, we know who colluded with Russians. They don't want to admit that they colluded with Russians, but they hired they hired a law firm that hired Fusion GPS, that hired a British spy that went and colluded with Russians. So I don't understand why they just didn't open up a lawsuit against themselves. They should name themselves and sue themselves so that they can get to the bottom of what do they have on their servers. Why didn't they give those servers to the FBI? This is nothing more, nothing less than a continuation of fundraising off of this scandal. This is made to play to the far left in this country so that the far left will continue to write checks because they don't believe that President Trump won the election fair and square. Yeah. Because the media, most of the media in this country has continued this narrative that there was collusion, there was obstruction, that Trump was somehow involved with Putin and Putin helped to steal this election. We've now looked at all this. None of that is true. But the Democrats need a way to keep their base motivated to turn out in November, and they need a way to continue to raise money. And they're raising millions and millions and millions of dollars to target Republicans over this Russia fiasco.
It's incredible.
But yet the only place where there's a Russia fiasco is with them.
So this is a fundraising exercise. Why doesn't the RNC come back and say, we're suing you for the same exact reason, given the fact that we know the bias at the top of the FBI, we know that there have already been felonies, we know about the leaking and the fact that the FBI, the DOJ, and perhaps the CIA were all in it to try to get Hillary to win and keep Donald Trump from winning. I mean, it's the same thing. Once again, they're pushing on you what they're doing. Isn't that right?
That's right. Well, I always like to say whatever the left accuses you of doing, they're doing themselves.
By the way, what about those servers?
That's exactly what you have here.
Mr. Chairman, what about those servers? I mean, remember when
I don't know about the servers. I don't know.
When the Democratic National Committee got hacked, you would think that the DNC wants the might and the power and the strength of the U.S. government behind them to find out who hacked, how come all these emails are out in the public's view, and yet they didn't do that at all. They didn't give the server to the FBI. They hired a private company to look at their servers.
Exactly. So the obvious question here is that, once you were notified by the FBI that maybe somebody had hacked into your system, for sure, once those emails became public, right, and they came public, I think mid-July, you think you would immediately call the FBI in to try to figure out and get to the bottom of what had happened.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. There must be a reason why they didn't want the FBI to come in.
Yeah.
I think we probably know the reason why. There was probably a lot of bad things that were on that system. Real
quick, Mr. Chairman, let me switch gears. Tomorrow we've got the vote from the Senate committee on Mr. Pompeo in terms of becoming the new Secretary of State. Your thoughts on what we'll see tomorrow out of this vote for Mr. Pompeo?
Well, Mr. Pompeo should have been confirmed weeks ago. This is really the number 3 person in our government. We have high-level negotiations going on with the North Koreans now and South Koreans, trying to solve that long-standing conflict. Mr. Pompeo was already confirmed as the director of the FBI. He's a good man. He knows what he's doing. The president trusts him. This is about our nation's national security, and the United States Senate should stop playing politics with our national security. So a president has a right to hire whoever he wants, especially as it relates to someone with national security.
Right.
We should not let domestic politics get involved in this decision, and the Senate should do its job and do it quickly.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens tomorrow then. Mr. Chairman, good to see you, sir. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.